Dear respected Siom, dear respected brother and sister, dear respected friends, during the last week here in Banpra, there are many beautiful days. I don't know in your place whether you have a beautiful sunshine, beautiful days like us here in Banpra. It is very beautiful. The sky is very blue and young leaf sprout, beautiful green, and around us is very quiet, very peaceful. There is not so many cars around, and there's not so much activity. It reminds me 50 years ago when I was in Vietnam. I was in the rural area, very quiet and peaceful. There was not so much mobility, movement, even though there's the wars going on, but ordinary life, normal daily life was very peaceful and calm. Every years around this time in April, we have the Easter retreat. And during the last few days, looking at the sky, looking at young leaf, beautiful young leaf, I asked myself, what should I offer to the community this year? The practice and the contemplations. What can we learn from the life of Jesus Christ, and what can we learn from the life of the Buddha together? And it is very interesting to see that the two traditions are very similar. Easter is the time, it is a celebration after 40 days of practicing penance and fasting. Penance and fasting. 40 days without counting Sunday. And Easter is the celebration on the third day after the Friday, which is the day when Jesus was crucified. After the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It's very beautiful tradition. Very beautiful tradition. In Buddhism, we had also the same concept. No mud, no lotus. Without suffering, there will be no wisdom and insight. Easter is the day of resurrection of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion. It's very meaningful. Yeah. During this time of 2020, there is so much suffering that is going on. Will Will we have a Easter day after so much suffering? Perhaps the answer is yes, because life is impermanent. Suffering cannot last forever. Suffering will end one day. And during the process of suffering, we will learn from our suffering. And we can transform the mud into the lotus. When I contemplate about the image or the story of Jesus Christ's life, Jesus was crucified on the cross. And then 3 days after, he rise up again. He rise to life again. Very beautiful metaphor. Very beautiful image. Regardless of how much suffer we as human beings go through, there is the possibility, there's the capacity for us to go beyond it, to rise above our suffering, and to be born again into joy and happiness. And that's what happened to Jesus Christ. That is something miraculous about human beings. We have the capacity to go beyond our suffering, to rise up from the mud of suffering into a lotus. And the Buddha had the same insight. On the night of his enlightenment, when the morning star rises, according to the legend, the Buddha attained the full enlightenment. And at that moment, the Buddha proclaimed, "How strange that all living beings have this capacity of being peaceful, being joyful, but they don't know, and they allow themselves to be drowned in the ocean of suffering." The capacity to be joyful, to be happy, is something deep within us. In Buddhism, we call it the Buddha nature. And in the Christian tradition, sometimes people call it the kingdom within. The kingdom within. When we suffer, we have the tendency to go into a mode of thinking and living. And that mode of thinking and living is a mode of polarization. Polarization. We divide the world into me and you. We divide the world into two opposites. That's what's meant by polarization. Two opposites. To the plus and to the minus. We come into a dualistic mode of thinking. And we have the tendency to think that it will be better if the other is not there. When we have a conflict with our partner, for example, The moment we have a conflict, it would be great if I have a divorce. It would be great if I will never see my partner again. Any kind of conflict, right away, we turn into this mode of thinking. We divide ourselves up. We divide the world up. We divide the reality up into two opposite reality. Something that we would like to keep, and something that we want to get rid of. When we have a conflict with one person, right away we have the tendency to think that it would be better if that person is not here, in this place, in this house. The same thing with the coronavirus. When it happened to us, right away we have the tendency to think we have to find the medicine to kill it, to get rid of it. But life does not function that way. Life does not function by dividing into two polarity like that. What does life offer? What life offers is the possibility for compromise, the possibility for living together, to be together, to join these two polarity together. And that is the meaning of rising above death. There's death, there's a crucifixion. But Jesus Christ rise above it. This act of rising above death actually is rising above the polarization, the polarity. Rising above the polarity. Sometimes we have the tendency to think that death is something that is in contrast to life. Perhaps we can write here, death is a small capital death, and life is small capital life. That is a form of duality, a form of opposite. That means death is something that is completely different from life, contrast. Spring is coming. But when Jesus Christ rise from death, He rise beyond the little capital death, the little capital life, and He reached something called capital life and capital death. Capital life and capital death is one single reality. That is the totality that cannot be separated, living including dying at the same time is one single reality. We can say that Jesus Christ rise up from death to reach eternal life. But it's possible to say that Jesus Christ rise up from death and reach eternal death. Eternal life is the language of Christianity, and eternal death is the language of the Buddhists. We call it nirvana. Nirvana is eternal death. That's nirvana. Nirvana is the extinguishing of all of the defilement. In Buddhism, we have three main roots about defilement. The three main roots of the defilement is craving, resistance, or enmity, or hatred, or anger. And delusion or confusion or ignorance or lack of understanding. These three roots of defilement within us prevent us from seeing the capital life, seeing the capital death. And in Buddhism, we practice to purify these three defilements. And in the Christian tradition, before Easter, before the rise of Jesus Christ, you practice 40 days of penance and fasting. Penance and fasting is a form of physical purification. Physical purification. And on the Easter, when Jesus Christ rise from the death, he attained the spiritual purification. That's how Buddhists think. We have physical purification, we have mental purification, and we have spiritual purification. Thanks to the practice of purification, we have a chance to go higher, to lift ourselves up. And in Buddhism, there is 5 ways to practice purification. The first practice is the practice of mindfulness. The practice of purification by mindfulness training. Purification by Mindfulness Training. Purification by collecting ourselves. Collecting ourselves so that we become stable, solid, and we become a mountain in the middle of a storm. We learn to collect ourselves, not allow ourselves to be pulled by our circumstances. That's called purification by collecting ourselves. We don't allow the external situation to move us. Any circumstances, whether it's a disease, whether it's a natural disaster, the storm, earthquake, or even a conversation, the gossip of a member in the community, or the gossip that your partner bring back from his or her workplace. You have the capacity to listen just for the sake of listening. And you listen and you don't move. You listen and you know that I heard that, and that's it. No more fabrication, no more development into different story. But just listen deeply. It's a very healing process. The other day, a friend called me on the telephone for consultation. During this outbreak, our institute offer consultation online as a service. And a lady called a friend in one of my courses. She can recognize my voice. And she's very kind. She said that she practiced what she had learned at the institute through our courses. And she was able to open her heart. And she would like to offer constructive input, constructive suggestion to her friend, to her beloved one, to her colleague also. But those people react and don't see her constructive input, her constructive goodness, and she suffers from that very deeply. And that is our tendency. When we listen to someone, we cannot collect ourselves. We will react, whether we like it or we don't like it. Or we do not completely understand what has been shared. We are deluded. We are contaminated by these three poisons of craving, resistance, or delusion. Our mind is crowded. When we listen to something, right away we will fall into these three modes. So her friends who do not practice, he or she does not have the capacity to listen deeply. So I share with our friends that yes, it's wonderful that you practice and you are able to open your heart to love the other person and have the willingness to give positive, constructive suggestion, that's wonderful. But the other person, perhaps he or she does not practice yet, and he or she doesn't know the practice. So you need to practice deep listening. And through your practice, perhaps you can help him or her. So whenever your friends share something, you learn to practice deep listening. You listen wholeheartedly without being contaminated by the three poison of craving or grasping, resistance or pushing away, or ignorance, completely do not pay attention to what they say, being indifferent to what they say. You practice wholeheartedly, deep listening. And after some time, the other person will feel the energy, will feel your goodwill, your good willingness. And from time to time, that person will be able to receive this capacity of deep listening when he or she has open-minded. And throughout the process of this deep listening, you cultivate a relationship. You cultivate the trust of the other person. So then by the time you share something, perhaps he or she will be able to listen to you. He or she will have the capacity of deep listening and to receive your constructive input. It is a process. It could take a few days, few months, few weeks, or years. Please do not think that you attend one course over the weekend, you open your heart, and then other people will receive your constructive input. No, you need to build a relationship. And in order to develop this capacity of deep listening and to be able to build a relationship with the other person through deep listening and loving speech, throughout this process, you learn to express your deep love. Your deep love. And that is the love that the metaphor of rising from the dead expressed. That is the deep love. The love of embracing the polarity. The capacity of embracing the polarity and not to have the willingness to destroy the opposite. Have the willingness to get rid of the thing that we do not like. But to be able to embrace the opposite. And when you have this patience, when you have this the endurance, this patience, it is a true mark, a mark of true love. Our teacher Thay said that patience is a mark of true love. You have to be very patient. You have to be very patient to your friends. Even you have practiced, you open your heart, you need a lot of patience in order to express your true love. And the moment he or she can be in touch, So when you are able to practice deep listening and loving speech, and you can be solid as a mountain, to be there, to listen deeply, even though the other person might say something extremely wrong about yourself, even though the situation is completely against you, you can sit there with all of your stability and solidity, and that in this way you practice purification by collecting yourself. And that is the second way of purification, the capacity to be solid as a mountain. And the third is purification by insight or understanding. Insight or understanding. Purification by insight or understanding. That is the insight of non-discriminative wisdom. Many times we fall into this mode of discriminative thinking. We have the tendency to think that this is what I think. That is what the other person thinks. This is my situation. The other person is his or her situation. It has nothing to do with me. But we need to learn to go beyond this mode of thinking, to go beyond this mode of discriminative thinking, and learn to see that we are deeply connected to one another. Many times we think that we as humans, we have the right to live. And all other living beings does not have the right to live. The tiger, when it goes into our village, we kill it. The lion go into our village, we will kill it. And the virus go into our body, and we are going to kill it. But life is a manifestation of totality. The Buddha expressed it in a very concise and brief form. This is because that is. This is because that is. I am like this because the other person like that. Together we create this world. And we have to learn to live together, to cooperate. We cannot get rid of the other. The moment we get rid of the other, another other will come. You don't like this weed in the garden, you pull it very hard. A few days later, another kind of weed will come. Another kind of grass, another kind of a plant will come there in place of that weed. You cannot get rid of the other. The other always comes. But we have to learn to live together. We learn to be together. We have to learn to be together in harmony with all living beings, and to see that human is only one species among all of the species of the living world. And this Non-discriminative thinking is very important. Many times, difficulty arise because we operate in this way of thinking, this discriminative way of thinking. We don't have consideration for others. We only think of ourselves. We don't consider the other person in our way of thinking, in our way of life. So purification by insight, by understanding, is to learn to see the totality of life, the totality of everything. We do not exist alone in this universe, but we exist together with the whole universe. It is so important to develop this insight. And it may take many years. It's not easy. Anything happen right away, we operate in the mode of discriminative thinking. We cannot accept the other person. We cannot accept the wrong behavior of our partner, of our son, our daughter, of our brother and sister. We said that is not acceptable. But we are all making mistake. None of us will be perfect. We are imperfect. There was a lady who committed adultery. And in the old day, people will punish her by throwing the stone onto her. So she suffered a lot. Anyone who passed by will have the right to throw the stone on her. And that day, Jesus came by, and out of the compassion for this lady, she said to the crowd, if any one of you think that you do not make any mistake in your life, then you have the right to throw the stone on this lady. But if any one of you make any mistake on this life, then please do not throw the stone on this lady. And thanks to that compassion, the lady was safe. The lady was safe. It doesn't mean that Jesus accepts her wrong act of adultery. No. It's not acceptable. But we can still live together with that person. We don't have to kill that person. We can all make mistakes, but we can all live together. The coronavirus can make a mistake by killing a lot of people. But for sure, we have to learn to live with coronavirus. We cannot get rid of it. Because once it enters into human population and we cannot contain it, then it will become a seasonal flu. So we have to learn to practice, to purify ourselves, and to be able to live in harmony with our adversary, with our opponent, with the opposite, with the other. And how can we do that? We do that by the energy of love. The energy of universal love. The energy of non-discriminative love. This non-discriminative love has the capacity of offering joy. We call it loving kindness. It has the capacity to reduce the suffering of the other, and we call it compassion. And it has the capacity to celebrate together with the success of the other, sharing joy with the other. And it has the capacity to include the different, and we call it inclusiveness, the four quality of true love. So by purification by insight and understanding, from this there comes true compassion. Number 4, after we practice purification by mindfulness training, purification by collecting ourselves, purification by insight and understanding, we reach a state of purification. A state of purification. That is our whole being, we can experience a sense of being purified. A sense of purified. Physical purification as well as mental purification as well as spiritual purification. We have a sense that we are clean. We have a sense that we are liberated. We have a sense of being purified, being peaceful, being calm. You can feel it when you practice these, the first 3 steps. Then, depending on the depth of your practice, you can experience different state of purification, different degree of feeling being purified, feeling being light, feeling being uplifted. And that's what the experience on the Easter offer. After 40 days of penance and fasting, we have purified to a certain degree our physical being. And on the Easter, we have a chance to allow this state, we allow ourselves to experience this state of purification. This state of purification is not so complicated. It's very easy to understand. When you go to the grass, to the field in the spring, your heart is open. You feel the blue sky. You see the young leaf sprouting. The birds are singing. And the weather is so pleasant. And you experience this pleasantness, this state of being purified by the energy of the spring. And that's what the Buddha experienced in the springtime, under the rose apple tree. At that time, he was only 8 or 9 years old. He was sitting underneath a rose apple tree during the springtime when there is the ceremony of beginning the harvest season of plowing the earth ceremony. lễ hạ điền. Coughing, so we need to put on mask and prepare. I don't know whether when I talk through the mask you can hear me, but I try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now when you cough, you need to put on mask to protect the other. And that's the practice of purification by mindfulness training. Mindfulness training is the capacity to restrain oneself, to help oneself and to help the other. So you need to put on mask when you cough nowadays. So the Buddha, on that day, he was sitting under the sunshine, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the spring energy. And he experienced a state of lightness, a state of happiness, a state of being purified. And that is the foundation for his meditative technique later on, called the 4 jhana. And the 5th is the knowledge that you have been purified. The knowledge of being purified. Being purified. The knowledge of being purified is that you know that now you are a harmonious living being. You are able to live together with another person in peace, in harmony, regardless of what happened to you, regardless of how he or she treated you. You continue to live in harmony with the other person. And that is the knowledge of being purified. That means you are fully going beyond these 3 defilements of craving, resistance, and delusion. And you become a noble one. A noble one. A noble one A noble one is the one who knows how to purify himself and who knows how to help the other people to purify himself or herself. This mask is made by our friend in Czech Republic. From our friend in Czech Republic. It helps to purify ourselves, and it helps to purify the other people. Do you think that during this coronavirus season, the Buddha will put on a mask? What do you think? According to the Buddhist tradition, perhaps the Buddha has so much magical power, he doesn't need to have a mask. But perhaps the Buddha, being a noble person who had the knowledge of being purified, perhaps he will put on a mask to help himself and to help the other living being, other people around him. Many times we have the image of the Buddha sitting very beautifully with a beautiful statue. That is the image that we used to have of the Buddha. But in order to commemorate this time, during the most difficult time of our coronavirus outbreak, perhaps we can make a Buddha Buddha is someone who feels deeply connected to other living beings. So do you think that the Buddha will not carry a mask in order to help other living beings? Perhaps he will do. Perhaps he will carry on a mask to help others. Because his compassion is unlimited. He will do anything that is possible in order to help other living beings. And that is the practice of purification by mindfulness training. Mindfulness training is any form of practice that helps to protect us and to protect the other. Many times we think that wearing a mask or washing the hand does not belong to the Buddhist monastic code, and we don't have to do it because as monastic brother and sister, we only practice the monastic code. But that is not completely inclusive thinking. Monastic code is only a part of humanity code. It's a part of helping us to purify. Washing hands is a practice during these days to help us to purify ourselves and to help the other people to purify themselves. Wearing a mask is the practice that helps us to purify ourselves and to help the other people to purify themselves. So with the knowledge of being purified, we will do whatever is possible so that we can live together peacefully, can be together peacefully. And rising up in the Easter, the metaphor of Jesus Christ, rising up from the dead, reborn again, is the image of celebrating someone who have completely accepting life, being one with life. And it's very easy to do in the springtime because spring is so beautiful. Springtime is so beautiful that we can practice to be one with life very easy. And in the Christian tradition, in the 4th century, people have made the decision to celebrate Easter on the Sunday, the first Sunday after the full moon. Okay, let's express it. March 21st is the equinox, the beginning of the springtime. So after March 21st, the full moon, the first full moon after March 21st, the Sunday after that will be the celebration of Easter, and that's the springtime. Springtime. I think my cough is calmed down now. Perhaps I can take off the mask. Easier for you to listen. So springtime is very beautiful time for us to practice to be one with life. Take off your mask to go out to the field and to enjoy the sunshine, to enjoy the beauty of life. One day for sure, we will not have to wear the mask. But when needed, we will wear the mask again. We are free to do that. Sometimes we practice mindfulness and we are burdened by our mindfulness training. Before the Buddha passed away, he told Venerable Ananda, later on, please feel free to let go of unnecessary mindfulness training. Do not let it to be a burden. So there are mindfulness training that's very important that we have to keep for life. But there are very small, unnecessary, detailed mindfulness training we can let go. For example, wearing the mask. We wear it for some time as a means for us to go through the outbreak. But there's one day we will remove the mask. The same thing with our mindfulness training. There are certain mindfulness training that without practicing that, for sure, we will not be a monastic. The first 4 mindfulness training is very important that we have to commit ourselves to practice that. Then slowly, the different training become less and less important. If we can practice the minute, fine detailed training, that's very good. And everyone is encouraged to practice that so that we can purify ourselves, to make ourselves completely beautiful. But if we cannot practice it because of our genetic makeup, because of our cultural prohibition, then we can let go. So, wearing the mask is the same thing like practicing the mindfulness training. We need to be able to skillful to see when mindfulness training will act as a way to purify ourselves. If we are not careful, the mindfulness training becomes an obstacle and it becomes something that prevents us from purification. So we have to be very intelligent in our practice. Spring day is very beautiful. Now there is an outbreak. There are difficulties, but life continues to manifest. Learn to open your heart and to enjoy life deeply. The Christian tradition choose the first Sunday after the first moonlight of the spring to be the day to celebrate life. In the Buddhist tradition, the birthday of the Buddha was also, according to the legend, to be in the springtime. Very soon, the Buddhist tradition will celebrate the Buddha's birthday within 1 more month. So it's about 1 month later than the Christian tradition. But I think it's the same intention. We don't know whether the Buddha actually was born during the springtime or actually Jesus Christ rise after that in the springtime. We don't know. But it had become a tradition. There are cultural elements in it. There are cultural significance in it. What's the most important is that it reminds us that spring is very beautiful. And it's a time for us to be in touch with life. And it reminds us that regardless of how much difficulty that we might go through, life is always beautiful. If we have this non-discriminative insight, then life can always be beautiful. Any community can be a very beautiful community. All living beings are very beautiful the way they are. Human is very beautiful, but coronavirus is also very beautiful. Coronavirus has its own right to live. We need to live in harmony with the coronavirus. And we need to live in harmony with all living beings, not just coronavirus. And how do we live in harmony with everything? We have to learn our position in the universe. We have to practice humility. We have to practice humbleness and to restrict ourselves. We have to purify our act. We have to learn fasting. We have to practice penance in order to see that we have a certain position, a certain limit in the cosmos, and shouldn't go beyond that limit. We have to learn to limit ourselves. And the mask is a symbol that helps us to remember to limit ourselves. I propose that in order to remember this difficult outbreak in the future, perhaps United Nations can propose a day called International Mask Day. And then in this International Mask Day, the whole world will stop, just like we have did in the last few weeks, but only one day. Airplane will stop, train will stop, everything will stop completely on that day. It will help the earth, it will help all the living beings, and will help us to protect ourselves from another virus. Thank you, and happy Easter Day. So tomorrow, on Monday, we will have the day of question and answer. So if you have any answer, then any question. If you have any question, then please you can have the question, and Sister Bi Nghiêm, Thay Phap Xã, Sister Song Nghiêm, and myself will be there for sharing our experience in the practice, and we do it interactively. So you can ask the question, and we can. And if you have any question that you like to ask, but you do not feel comfortable, then you can write an email to our office, and we will collect the question. Thank you for joining our Easter retreat. Được sao đâu chứ. So Pratipapti just said that in order to celebrate our Easter, we will have a picnic lunch on the Easter day.